Great. And then Chuck just let us know he's going to begin broadcasting in about a minute.
So thanks everybody who have joined us already for our third town hall of the Washington County Board of Commissioners. We will be waiting for just a moment here to have a couple more folks file in. So stand by for that. Just about a minute more. I think we'll just hold on for a second so last minute folks can join us. Thank you for joining us. All right. That's not quite a minute, but we will carry on because I think we are ready to go. Again, welcome to our Washington County community to the third of 4 quarterly town hall meetings of the Board of County Commissioners. My name is Philip Bransford. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm here to be your facilitator today. Before we go on further, I would like to ask Victor, our Spanish language interpreter, to make a brief announcement, if he would, please.
Good morning, everyone. English and Spanish will be available for this meeting. If you're joining us through a desktop or laptop computer, please click the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen. Or if you're using a Zoom app through a mobile device such as smartphone or tablet, press the 3 dots with the legend More at the bottom right or upper right hand side of your screen, and that way you will be able to select your preferred language. If you want to hear this meeting in English, please select English, or if you prefer Spanish, please select Spanish. Also enable mute original audio. If you have any questions, feel free to send a message in that box, or you can raise your virtual hand on Zoom to get help. Thank you and welcome. Muy buenos días a todos. Inglés y español estarán disponibles para esta reunión. Si está usando una computadora de escritorio o portátil, haga clic en el icono de globo en la parte inferior derecha de la pantalla de su computadora, o si está utilizando la aplicación de Zoom a través de un dispositivo móvil como un teléfono inteligente o tableta, presione los 3 puntos con la leyenda que dice More o Más, que se encuentra en la parte inferior derecha o en la parte superior derecha de su pantalla. Así, de esa manera va a poder seleccionar su idioma preferido. Si desea escuchar la reunión en inglés, por favor seleccione el inglés, o si prefiere español, seleccione en español. También habilite silenciar el audio original. Si tiene alguna pregunta, siéntase cómodo de enviarnos un mensaje por chat o levante la mano virtual en Zoom para obtener la ayuda. Gracias y bienvenidos.
Excellent. Thank you, Victor, for that announcement. Thank you also to Rosie, who is helping us in our Spanish language channel. Again, my name is Philip Bransford with the Washington County Administrative Office, and we are ready to begin our town hall, the third of 4 that the Board of County Commissioners has been holding about various topics throughout the year. Today's topic will be our rescue plan, the American Rescue Plan, federal funding, and what Washington County is doing with that funding. Let's see, before we go on much farther, though, I'd like to also acknowledge Mary and Christine, who are providing American Sign Language interpretation throughout today's event. Thank you to them as well. So what we have on the screen right now is the agenda for today. And you'll see that we're starting already with our welcome and our orientation here. We'll have about a 20-minute staff presentation, and the bulk or the most of the town hall will be our question and answer period with our Board of County Commissioners. So we want to reserve most of the time today for that interaction with our board members. And I'm very pleased to see them join us today. Let's look at the ground rules here, if you will, the guidelines for how we're going to talk about this topic today. If we could see the slide advance one. So we want to participate with intention. We want thoughtful communication throughout our town hall today. So please consider what you're saying thoughtfully. We appreciate the diversity of perspectives, all perspectives that we could possibly surface within the bounds of civility are welcome as part of our conversation today. And that means we are also agreeing to maintain a respectful space here in our conversations, respecting others that don't share your same opinion or don't come from the same perspective as you, and making that tone part of what we do today together. We want to create an opportunity for everyone to engage. So we want to make sure that each of us get a chance. And that means that we will start here with only one question or comment from our participants to make sure we have that opportunity. I think depending on how many participants are joining us today, we may be able to provide more opportunities, but at least for the get-go, for the beginning of our town hall, one question or comment is what we're going to focus on. If we can go one more slide. I'm going to ask now that our Board of County Commissioners provide a brief introduction of themselves and just a reminder to our board that we will have more time here towards the end for communicating about our priorities and issues. So this moment in time in our town hall is meant to simply introduce yourself, your name, the district that you represent. If you are representing all the districts, go ahead and say that. Help us understand the geography, the communities that are within that district. And we'll just hand this along, starting with the chair and moving to the right as this picture shows. So if I could please have Chair Catherine Harrington start the introductions. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Philip. Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine Harrington, your Washington County Commission Chair. I serve everyone in the great whole county that is Washington County. And I have the pleasure to serve with 4 district commissioners who are elected by essentially a quarter of the population of our county. So I'll turn it over to the District 1 Commissioner, Nafisa Fai.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nafisa Fai. I am the District 1 Commissioner, which is Beaverton, 2/3 of Beaverton, I should say, since Commissioner Treese is also Beaverton, and Aloha, Cooper Mountain, and Reedville. I'm excited to be here with you all. And I turn it to Commissioner Treese.
Thank you, Commissioner Fai. Good morning. My name is Pam Treese. I go by the pronouns she, her, hers. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very pleased that you're attending with us today. I am representing District 2, but I work for the entire county, as we all do in this process. But I am elected by the residents that include Bethany, North Bethany, the third of Beaverton that Nafisa talked about, a piece of Hillsborough, and all the way down toward the Garden Home area. So it's an interesting district. I believe I have the highest percentage of unincorporated Washington County in my district. So anyway, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning to everyone. And I would echo your comments that we all work for everyone in the county, but I happen to be elected by District 3, which is the southeastern quadrant of the county. I have 6 cities. And if you want to put slivers of others like Riverdale and some others are a little bit of Beaverton too. I think I still have just a tad. Most of my districts, though, is in cities. About 80% of the folks are in cities. And then I have a large rural area, not compared to Jerry Willie, who has 3/4 of the county in geographical area, but I have that as well.
So
Sure.
the cities of Tigard, Tualatin, King City, Durham, and Sherwood are all in your district, District 3, right, Commissioner Rogers?
Yeah, and I think you could add Wilsonville as well, a portion of Wilsonville. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are you through, Roy?
I am. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is Commissioner Jerry Willie, District 4. I have 5.5 cities, is what I call it. Primarily Cornelius, Forest Grove, Gaston, Banks, North Plains, and half of Hillsborough. I have a good portion of the rural western side of Washington County. My district touches 4 other counties, and so it's a wide geographical and mostly rural area of our county. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, commissioners, for your introductions. We are so pleased to have the entire Board of Commissioners present and ready to participate in today's town hall meeting. So thank you, and we're going to hear more from you as we share the lion's share of our meeting, our town hall, with questions and answers with you. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn now to our presentation here for the next 20 minutes so that everybody has a grounding in the same basic information about our topic today, the American Rescue Plan, our pandemic response and recovery funding we receive from the federal government. To help us with that, we're going to turn to Dorian Russell, our Senior Program Coordinator with the Washington County Administrative Office, who knows this information very, very well. And if we could advance the slide now to show Dorian, there she is. We will hand things over to you, Dorian, for our presentation.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that introduction. My contact information is on the screen here if anyone has additional questions beyond today's presentation. As mentioned, I'm the Senior Program Coordinator for Washington County's use of American Rescue Plan Act funding, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about the Board of County Commissioners' direction in pandemic recovery and response efforts. If we could please advance the slide. Yes, as mentioned, I'm going to be going over some of the 2021 investment areas that the Board of County Commissioners has directed us to fund, as well as talking about some of our next steps as we think about long-term holistic recovery from the pandemic. Next slide, please. So what is ARPA? What is the American Rescue Plan Act? Earlier this year in March, our U.S. Congress in Washington, D.C. passed the American Rescue Plan Act. And what this did is it sent pandemic relief funding for households, for businesses, and education, for local government, and more. It was a quite expansive suite of legislation. Next slide, please. You may be familiar with some of the aspects of ARPA already, perhaps if you received an individual stimulus check or are benefiting from the child tax credit. Some of the things that came out of ARPA included relief for individuals and families. So those stimulus checks, extended unemployment, the child tax credit, emergency renter and homeowner assistance, and utility relief. For businesses, this relief included paycheck protection, paid leave credits, employee retention credits, shuttered venue support, and restaurant support. Funding for education, this included emergency funding for schools to address learning loss, for internet access, early childhood education, as well as homeless youth programs. What we're going to be talking about today is actually that funding that went directly for local government relief. Part of ARPA included what's called state and local fiscal recovery funds. And what this means is that governments, including cities, the county, the state, and tribal governments received funding to use with great flexibility to ensure that we can continue to offer the services that we continue to provide that you rely on, as well as support long-term recovery. Next slide, please. So with these funds coming from the federal government, what is Washington County allowed to spend ARPA funding on? So the federal government has rules that guide the county and all other recipients of ARPA funds on what we can and cannot use the funding on. However, in responding to the pandemic and its many diverse impacts, we have much more flexibility than is typical. ARPA funds can be used for a diversity of pandemic response and pandemic recovery needs. And these types of things span investments in public health, in economic recovery, in infrastructure, and other efforts to bring our communities out of the emergency. Through this presentation, we'll be walking through the specific investments that Washington County is making in some of these areas. And throughout the next year and beyond, we'll be looking to you, community, for your priorities and what investments you think would best help us recover over the long term. It's important to know that these are one-time funds. We won't continue to receive funds like this from the federal government into the future. And so right now, the Board of Commissioners and staff are being extremely thoughtful in how we can use these one-time funds to make an impact that is sustainable and lasts for long-term recovery far beyond this funding. Next slide, please. So before spending any of this funding, Washington County leaders sat down and thought deeply about what our core values are and how our values can help us in guiding and making the best investments possible for supporting long-term recovery in our communities. And so looking at these values, we can think of these as what we stand for in this work. So in thinking about what we stand for in using ARPA to make investments, this work includes leading with equity, because by leading with racial equity, we can mitigate historical impacts, change persistent systemic issues, and achieve a more inclusive future. This includes focusing on resilience. We're aiming to foster strong organizations, strong individuals, and strong systems that focus on long-term solutions. And collaboration. We know that we achieve better outcomes when we work together. And finally, good governance. We are responsible stewards of the public trust and resources. Next slide, please. So in addition to identifying what we stand for, the Washington County Board of Commissioners also thoughtfully considered core principles. And we can think of core principles as the rules that we follow to get to a full recovery from this pandemic. It's essentially how we'll get there in using our ARPA funding. And so Washington County's principles include centering racial equity, investing in public health first, leveraging or using multiple resources, being innovative, proactive, and strategic, seeking collaborative solutions, and importantly, working with transparency. Next slide, please. I want to acknowledge that we're building on a strong foundation. Our current investment areas for ARPA use grew directly out of the lessons learned from the county's pandemic response to date. We've been responding to the pandemic for a year and a half and continue to learn and grow. This includes our relationships with community-based organizations. It includes the community engagement that we've done to date and the learning that we've had from the lived experiences of our community members. We're using this to make a community engagement plan this year that will help us create pandemic recovery priority areas throughout the duration of ARPA. Next slide, please. Washington County is very carefully balancing the continued response of the pandemic as well as pandemic recovery efforts. Right now, we're diligently working to respond to the pandemic and save lives. The risk isn't gone. And looking ahead, we have until the end of 2024 to decide what we're spending all of our ARPA funds on. So looking for that long-term recovery, we're carefully balanced learning to live amid the pandemic while also trying to get out of it. And so on this timeline, you can see in the blue line, our continued response. And on the blue line, you can see our thoughtful recovery. You'll notice that the timeline for both overlap, and we have a much longer period, a long road ahead in determining what our pandemic recovery efforts will be. Next slide, please. So Washington County received half of its ARPA funding this year from the federal government. We will receive the second half of our funding next year in mid-2022. And throughout the next year, we're going to be looking to you, to community, for your priorities and what investments you think will help us continue to recover in the long term. While these are one-time funds, we receive them in 2 payments. We'll receive the second half next year, but we'll be able to spend that funding over the next several years for pandemic recovery. The first half of our funding was $58 million, and next year we will receive another $58 million for our recovery and response efforts. Next slide, please. So the ARPA investment areas that the Board of County Commissioners has approved include, first and foremost, protecting public health. Additionally, community stabilization and wellness, stabilizing and supporting the local economy, community engagement, continued operations, and a contingency fund. Next slide, please. So for protecting public health, this is a majority of the first half of our ARPA funding. Importantly, we are saving lives by investing in surviving COVID-19. We're investing $31.5 million in isolation and quarantine support, in vaccination, in testing, and community education. Importantly, in surviving COVID-19, we're also working to meet people's basic needs, including basic supplies like food and diapers, and wraparound services for households who have to quarantine. Next slide, please. I truly want to underscore the importance of Washington County's decision to protect public health first with ARPA dollars, because through this investment, Washington County is saving lives. Our role as the county is to protect public health first. We're using these dollars to directly invest in people by protecting our communities from and responding to COVID-19. We're still learning how to live amid COVID-19. And as we continue to carefully balance continued response to the pandemic and pandemic recovery efforts, we know that with the proliferation of the Delta variant, that this further underscores our approach in protecting public health first. In order to get to that full holistic recovery, including economic recovery, we have to prevent COVID-19 from spreading and continuing. So this investment in public health is also an investment in our continued and future recovery. Next slide, please. Our investments in community stabilization and wellness include a childcare investment, $2.8 million for us to assess childcare provider capacity throughout the county, to develop a provider grant program, and to provide support for the development of focused childcare networks that are culturally specific and span several languages. We're also investing in behavioral health, in suicide prevention and postvention, homelessness prevention, and importantly, making sure that behavioral health teams are well staffed. We're investing in family health, in infant, child, and family support, and community nurse staffing. And importantly, we're specifically investing in BIPOC prenatal and early childhood support. We're investing in shelter and safety, services at encampments, including outreach, sanitation, and hygiene. We're also investing in utility bill assistance through a ratepayer assistance program for past due water, sewer, and stormwater accounts for people who have become far behind on their bills. Next slide, please. We're beginning to invest in stabilizing and supporting the local economy. We're investing over $2.5 million in small business recovery. And this is through the continued work at our business recovery centers, as well as small business support, including technical assistance and access to funding. We're also investing in our workforce with over $2.8 million going towards job training programs, for reskilling programs, and for wraparound services for low-income workers. We're also investing in a broadband investment plan. We understand that access to the internet, in terms of access and affordability, has become incredibly important during the pandemic for accessing education, the workforce, and government services. Next slide, please. Community engagement. We're working to diversify accessible communications. We're improving our county social media and creating new video streaming communications. As mentioned, we're going to be working throughout the fall, the winter, and throughout the ARPA duration to build community capacity through collaboration. We're building partner capacity in a cross-jurisdictional way. And what I mean by that is we're working with other ARPA recipients, so cities across our region as well, to better use our resources and engage. We're leading community engagement strategies, including coaching, outreach materials, participant stipends, and other related support. We're also holding ourselves accountable by advancing data equity. And what I mean by this is we're taking a look at the tools and the strategies that we use to make sure that the programs that we invest in are actually making a difference and resulting in the outcomes that that community wants to see. Next slide, please. Continued operations. So as a government entity, we know that having resilient and flexible operations allows us to continue providing you the essential services you expect from us. So we're investing in our increased facilities, technologies, and communications needs, as well as the coordination needed to get these programs off the ground. Next slide, please. We're also holding some funding, $2.7 million, in contingency. And we're saving some of this funding because we do not yet know how the pandemic will continue to change. Having funding set aside allows us to respond to emergency needs that we may not have planned for. Each month, the pandemic has progressed in new and sometimes surprising ways, and this allows us to continue to be adaptable. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to talk about next steps. Parallel to administering all of the programs described in each of the different investment areas we just reviewed, we're developing plans for how to use our second round of funding. As I mentioned, Washington County received $58 million this year, which we're strategically balancing in pandemic response, leading by protecting public health first, and pandemic recovery efforts. And as we look forward to developing additional pandemic recovery efforts, it is our intention to co-create pandemic recovery priorities with community. To do this, we plan to do comprehensive community engagement together with trusted community-based organizations, as well as other government entities such as cities who have also received ARPA funding. In the infographic that you see here at the top, we have the most important stakeholder, you, Washington County residents. Arrows point directly to the center in developing pandemic recovery priorities. On the left-hand side, community-based organizations are working directly with Washington County and with community. We understand that community organizations have long-standing, deep-rooted relationships, as well as culturally specific knowledge that helps us to do widespread engagement and better ensure that our pandemic recovery priorities reflect the diversity of lived experience throughout the county. Together, pandemic recovery priorities will be developed through this process and inform the investments that come out of our 2022 ARPA funds that we received from the federal government. Next slide, please. And so with all of our information that we just presented, I'm excited to turn it back to the Washington County Board of Commissioners to outline, again, all of the investment areas that we have in place now for pandemic response and recovery, and also some of their vision for the ongoing recovery efforts that will continue for the next several years. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorian Russell. You've done great work for many, many weeks and months, really, helping our board come to some of the decisions here that you've presented. So thank you. And I'm going to first ask if we could remove the presentation from our screen so we can all see one another. And I'm going to also ask to have Victor make yet another announcement to make sure anyone who has joined us before he made the first announcement, to make sure that anyone can hear all of the rest of the presentation, which will be about questions and answers from our board. Victor, would you please make your announcement?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. English and Spanish is available for this meeting. If you're joining us through a desktop or laptop computer, please click the globe icon at the bottom right of your computer screen. Or if you're joining us through the mobile app using a smartphone or a tablet, there will be 3 dots with the legend More at the bottom right or upper right hand side of your screen. That way you will be able to select your preferred language. If you want to continue listening this meeting in English, please select English. Or if you prefer Spanish, please select Spanish. Also enable mute original audio. If you have any further questions, feel free to send them in the chat or raise your virtual hand so we can assist you. Thank you and welcome. Bienvenidos a todos. Inglés y español están disponibles para esta reunión. Si está usando una computadora de escritorio o portátil, haga clic en el icono de globo en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla. O si está usando una aplicación de Zoom por un teléfono inteligente o tableta, presione los 3 puntos que se encuentran en la parte inferior derecha o superior derecha de su pantalla que dice More o Más. Así podrá seleccionar la opción de interpretación. Si quiere escuchar la reunión en inglés, seleccione inglés, o si lo prefiere en español, seleccione el español. Habilite silenciar audio original. Si tiene alguna pregunta, siéntase cómodo de enviarnos un mensaje por medio del chat o por favor levante su mano virtual de Zoom para poder obtener ayuda. Gracias y bienvenidos.
Thank you, Victor, for that reminder. And now we can start in on our discussion, our conversation with our Board of County Commissioners. If you would please raise your hand in the Zoom session, that way we can identify you and have you ask a question. You could also type in to our chat function question or comment. And we have people ready to monitor that chat to make sure we raise your voice up into our discussion, even if you do not want to join, making a converse or asking a question real time. We can always use the chat. We are going to start with one question per person, but let's see how this goes, because we might be able to get more than one, but we want to give everyone a fair chance here to ask at least one question. And please, lastly, if you would identify the commissioner you would like to ask your question of, that will be helpful. And I can help with that too, but it would be lovely for you to go ahead and direct your question to a specific commissioner. So if we are ready to go, board, I think we'll start in with some questions. I see Colleen had raised her hand. Maybe she raised both hands. Colleen, would you please ask our first question?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I will direct this to Chair Catherine Harrington, as you represent the whole county. I'm a resident of Tigard, and I'm curious about Washington County's moving forward with implementing a tenant right to counsel measure using ARPA funds. For those who aren't familiar with the tenant right to counsel movement, it's been happening pre-COVID, but really taken up a lot of energy across the United States. During COVID, it started in New York City and has spread to cities like San Francisco and Boulder and Denver, as well as Washington State was the first state to pass a tenant right to counsel recently. Seattle has also most close to home, Multnomah County recently allocated a couple million, I think it's 1.6 million from their ARPA funds to institute a tenant right to counsel measure. And what it does is it provides a tenant who goes to court when they are being evicted by their landlord with legal representation. We do not have representation in civil courts, and it creates massive inequities here in Washington County throughout the length of the pandemic. While we've had moratorium protections, there have been 541 filings of eviction in our county. That's 541 families who have faced eviction despite the fact that everybody is telling us that they cannot be evicted. Of those 541 filings, only 45 tenants had a lawyer. And that's an extreme increase because there's been attention to this previous to the moratorium in Washington County in 2020. In the first 3 months when we had no protections, 633 filings in January, February, and March of 2020, and only 6 of those people had lawyers. 6 out of 600. This is a massive inequity. For those who care mostly about how much it's going to cost, studies by the advisory firm Stout Resus Ross show that right to counsel laws actually save jurisdictions money. For example, Baltimore's effort is expected to cost $5.7 million annually, but is projected to save $35.6 million in cost associated with evictions. This is in preventing houselessness. So please do it.
Thank you, Colleen. I appreciate that. Commissioner or Chair Harrington, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Colleen. That is really an excellent idea. One thing that our team has already done is to have some of our housing services team members, a new case manager, participate right in the eviction court proceedings so that we can help people get tied into the rental assistance programs that we have, not only, for example, the utility assistance that you see here with these ARPA dollars, but also with other emergency assistance dollars that we have received through the federal government, through HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Administration. So at this juncture, unless Dorian corrects me, I don't believe we had thought in this first tranche to include a program such as you just mentioned. But it's one reason why we're having today's town hall, is to learn more about where we may have very severe unmet needs in our community and how we might address the needs of the community through the contingency dollars here in tranche 1 or the first half, as well as with tranche 2. So thank you very much for enlightening us today about not only the need, but a potential solution for that. Really appreciate it. And if you'd like to either include your contact information in the chat, or do feel free to send that to us through the email address bcc@co.washington.or.us. And I'm sure a member of our team can include that in the chat conveniently as well. Thank you again for your speaking up today, Colleen. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Colleen. And we're going to turn to Jamie next. And as Jamie is getting ready, I'm going to admonish myself because I've been speaking a little bit too quickly throughout the morning. So this is a reminder to me, and others can follow if they would please, that we'll want to speak deliberately, a little slower than perhaps you are used to talking, so that our interpreters can catch up, can accurately depict what we're saying, and we will want to have a chance to involve anyone from our entire community represented here today in our town hall. So that's just a reminder. Let's see, Jamie, are you ready?
I am. Honorable Commissioners, my name is Jamie Maruka, and I represent Assistance League of Greater Portland, a nonprofit serving the local community with programs supporting students and assault victims. We would like to express our gratitude for the support of Washington County with a generous grant from Washington County Cares last year. Thank you. During the last school year, your support helped serve about 2,900 school children in low-income families in Washington County by providing them with vouchers to purchase new clothing. I'd like to share a comment from a school counselor. I had one family in tears tell me that it made such a difference to be able to shop for her 2 children after losing her job and needing to pay rent. They would not have been able to get sneakers or some basic clothing items for her children for the fall. I had so many appreciative families. I always do. But this year, it was even more so with the circumstances. Now, during normal times, most of our revenue is earned by volunteers at Assistance League Thrift and Consignment Shop in Beaverton. These are not normal times. Last year, our shop income was reduced by 75% due to the pandemic. We were unable to access other forms of federal pandemic support because we are entirely volunteer staffed, and most government funding was based on payrolls. Your grant meant a lot to us. We still ran at a deficit last year, but it was much less than we feared thanks to your support. We continue to be impacted by the pandemic due to volunteer concerns about health, and it'll take a while for us to get up to speed again. We deeply appreciate an opportunity for nonprofits to apply for funding with the American Rescue Plan, and I hope you'll partner with us again. You aren't just providing clothes, you're providing equity for those families in greatest financial disparity. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And I'm wondering if Commissioner Fye would be interested in any response there, given the reference to Beaverton, but knowing full well that there's several of our commissioners representing different parts of Beaverton. But I wonder if Commissioner Fye wanted to take the floor.
Thank you, Philip. I'm not sure if I have anything to add, just other than to say, Jamie, if you have a specific request that you'd like for the board to consider, I would recommend that you put that proposal together and ask the commissioners to support. It sounds like it's a great initiative, and it sounds like it's a really immediate way to bring relief to people, and I'm pretty sure we can figure out what help we can provide.
Thank you.
Let's see if, thank you, Commissioner. I think Marshall had put a hand up earlier, but maybe it went down. Marshall, would you like to address the board? And if not, we are ready for the next comment or question from our participants here. This town hall is really meant to give the floor to you in our community, so you have time to interact directly with our board. Yes, go ahead.
This is Marshall. I use she, her pronouns, and I am on the board to Call to Safety. So I really wanted to uplift what funding would be directed specifically to organizations that are doing direct response. Call to Safety has responded to 21,591 crisis line calls and has had 281 text and chat conversations. We've helped with financial assistance increased over 3 times since 2019, with a total of $310,602 spent. And we know that through COVID, there's been an increase in DV and SA. For me personally, I am a survivor myself, and I actually am a user of these benefits. I left my marriage in 2019, and so 2020 was a really rough year for me. And I know that our staff members are, requesting a higher wage because of all of the trauma that they are having to put onto themselves while also independently doing their work. So yeah, just an open question to the commissioners on, specific organizations or ways that we can be in touch to talk about maybe accessing this funding to better serve and do our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. I want to acknowledge your experience and your survivorship, if that's even a word, as you described the need throughout our community with respect to domestic violence and the strain and trauma that has been part of the last year and a half for too many of our community members. So thank you very much for your speaking up and raising that. I wonder who on the board would like to address that. Perhaps, Chair, you would like to start off, and of course, any other board member I know would be very interested in this topic that Marshall has brought up.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Marshall, for joining us today, and for all of our community members who are here. So one of the learnings out of 2020, as difficult as it was to see how our county and all of our local nonprofits, community-based organizations could strengthen relationships and program ties to meet the needs of our community. And as we have continued to have the benefit of additional federal and state dollars, our departments are increasing efforts to work with an even larger array of community organizations. So thank you, Marshall, for introducing me to Call to Safety. Our departments in Health and Human Services, led by Director Marnie Kyle, as well as our Housing Services Division, may very well already be working with your organization, as well as our public safety side that includes our district attorney and our courts. One of the reasons why we're here today is to ensure that you and our community know how we're putting these federal dollars into action as swiftly as possible here in 2021. The beauty of the ARPA dollars is that the overall total is larger than we received with the CARES Act of last year and the coronavirus relief funds. The county had the opportunity to invest $104 million into our community COVID response and small business stabilization efforts. And the small business stabilization efforts were particularly led by co-chairs Commissioners Jerry Willey and Commissioner Pam Treese. And they helped us ensure that we had a vast array of grants going out to businesses. With the ARPA funds, we get $116 million, which is, once again, a large amount of funding. We were successful in deploying the CRF funds in 2020, $104 million over 8 months. So 8 short months. The $116 million through the American Recovery and Protection Act needs to cover 42 months. So that's 7.5 times more time for just a little bit more money. And the need is great to continue to help the folks in just incredible need here in our community, such as Marshall described, as well as to help our businesses move from stabilization into economic recovery so that more people have the opportunity of good family wage jobs. So thank you, Marshall, for sharing the story of success as well as the story of need, so that we on the board can truly identify with how additional funding can successfully be put into action swiftly for the benefit of community members, particularly the crisis case managers, are survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Really appreciate it. And please know that we've heard your input today and will consider that as we move forward with additional investments with these 2 parts to the ARPA funding. Thank you. And other commissioners, would you like to add anything more? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you, Chair. And I certainly agree with all of your comments. The one thing I would like to point out is that through our first year of experience through the CARES Act, it became really clear that the pandemic had an inordinate effect on women. And I say that from the standpoint of the need to provide in-home learning opportunities for their children, daycare constraints, workplace constraints, many of those. And I just want to assure you that this is an awareness level that this entire commission has. We have continued to focus on family-related issues through this process as well. So again, Marshall, thank you for your input, but I just wanted to put that forward that we as a commission are well aware of the impact on women in our community and our BIPOC community especially.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioner interested in addressing this particular topic? I think we've given a good overview, but I don't want to move on without offering that. I see Chair Harrington would like to say another word.
A community member has typed in the chat and has therefore reminded me that we do have a general assistance line, 211, that through the course of this pandemic, the resources have been expanded So 211 is now staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is an expansion from about 5 days a week with 12 hours of the day. Because the need is so great, there is additional time frame to respond to those needs. So I just want to reinforce, if folks have needs, please call 211. It's there to help you get connected with resources.
Thank you. That's a great segue to that next comment. We were just about to do that, and I appreciate you starting that response, Chair. But just before we do, was there any other commissioner that I didn't see wanting to address the prior comment? Okay, I'm just making sure about that. Thank you. Highland, there was, the chair started it off. Would you read a little bit more from that comment we just received?
Sure, Philip. So Forest Grove Councilor Christy Kotke asked in the chat. Christy says, "Thank you, commissioners, for the increased opportunities you are providing for the community to ask questions. The frequent communication in various ways with an eye on equity is appreciated. My question is, and forgive me if it was addressed, but how the 211 line can be improved, and can the ARPA funding help with that? Thank you again for this format. As a mom with a son with special needs, I am not able to always be stationary and on camera. This has allowed me to participate on this Saturday."
Perfect. That's helpful, especially for those that are watching on YouTube and maybe subsequently watching on YouTube to hear those comments that they wouldn't be able to see in our format right now. Thank you, Chair, for your response already. Were there any other responses to the councilor's comments and question? I know 211 is a vital resource and has been throughout the pandemic for accessing services and used statewide. But the investments that the chair mentioned has enabled more people to be served from that that hub, that clearinghouse of information about services in our community. So thank you. Let's see, do we have other comments or questions that I may not have been seeing among our participants?
Philip, may I say something?
Yes, please, Commissioner Fye.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Christy, for that question, and I'm glad you're able to participate. And I think this was the intention to, make our platforms and our communications accessible. So I'm glad to hear as a commissioner that it's working. In terms of the question that you asked, I'm interested in learning more of what improvements that you have in mind. I will be honest. I don't remember the last time I dialed 211 myself. So I'm really interested in what we can do as a Board of Commissioners to help. So it will be really beneficial for us to understand some of the barriers that the community or that you're hearing that people are facing. And then also what recommendations are you making in terms of the ARPA money? I think we did this morning, and if you missed it, it's okay. I think Dorian and our staff can share with you the presentation. But the $58 million minus the contingency, there's been, the money has been already allocated to certain areas that we need to focus on. So taking a look at that, see if you have any suggestions on to say, or maybe it fits into this bucket to also help out with 211. Because I know a lot of communities, when I was doing community organizing, a lot of community depend on 211, and it's a very vital platform that our community reach out to for help. So please let us know what we can do and send us any the barriers that you're hearing. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's helpful. And I see Bruce, your hand was raised. Would you like to address our town hall for 2 minutes?
Unmute. There. Yes, I am very excited that the 211 system has received this attention. When the pandemic hit, our food system collapsed, at least temporarily, and I became active in the Food Action Network that is run by the Community Action Organization in our county. And it meets monthly now, and food pantries and food delivery systems are all getting coordinated. I've been given access to some of the 211 database on behalf of the Oregon State Extension Service. And in going through the 211 system, I find that there's a lot of holes that exist in the information, and there's a lot of relationships that aren't covered. And I think that the 211 system emerged out of the old United Way system. And right now, their database is a flat, non-hierarchical database, and it would benefit tremendously by two things. One is by updating to a relational database where you could see the relationships between the entities. And the other is a big drive in the community for people to add their resources to the database so that we get a more complete listing of the services that are available in the county, and even having a graphical depiction of those so that you could find out what all groups are involved without going through the kind of burdensome process of dialing 211. In any case, 211 is a marvelous contribution to our welfare, and how could CARES money be used to further enhance it?
Thank you, Bruce. And I'm going to refer back to Commissioner Fai's response, which I think encapsulated the thought here, unless there was further comment about 211. My thought from our board, my thought was to turn to our next community member participating. So without objection, seeing or not hearing any, why don't we have Justice ask their question, if Justice is ready? Commissioner Fai, go ahead.
I think Chair Harrington was going to say something. I thought I saw you unmute yourself, Chair Harrington.
I did. I was just wondering if Marnie Kyle could join us for a moment. I believe, Marnie, if I'm correct, that the 211 system is a statewide system that has it's a real collaborative system. And so I just want folks to know that this isn't a system that Washington County runs and administers, but as Bruce Bartlett suggested, we can certainly encourage our community-based organizations, especially those that we've been working with throughout the scope of this pandemic, to try and connect up better there. But Marnie, is there anything you would like to add to help clarify the 211 system? That'd be great.
Chair Harrington, thank you and everyone for your time today. I think you're absolutely correct. 211 is a state system, and they are a fabulous partner that has helped us with everything with vaccination opportunities to the food system concerns that Mr. Bartlett raised. And there's certainly a system that we have ongoing conversations with, and we are happy to connect with them and see what we can do to strengthen the system. And also, just as a reminder, some of the funding that you approved for public health is being used to support coordination and collaboration across the food system providers, the food banks and community action and others that are trying to help folks get access to good nutrition. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us today, Marnie. For those of you who may not know Marnie Kyle, I mentioned earlier that she's the director from our Health and Human Services Department. Public health is one of the multiple divisions under her leadership. She is a recognized public health nurse with decades of experience in public service. We are really fortunate to have her leadership here in Washington County. She and her team have just been doing incredible work to help our community each and every day. So thank you, Marnie, for joining us on this Saturday. You know, I'm really pleased you're here, but on the other hand, I wish you'd had a full break today from work. So thank you very much for being one of our subject matter experts from our great Washington County staff who've joined us today.
I could not say that more eloquently. Thank you, Chair. We are so thankful for Marnie's leadership all throughout this pandemic. So thanks, Marnie. And I see, Colleen, you are ready to take another opportunity with our board. What I would like to do is go to Justice next, and then I see Michael is after Justice. So we're continuing with our approach where everyone gets a first chance. But thanks, Colleen, for being ready for that second chance. So with that, Justice, would you like to ask your question or make your comment?
Yes. And I guess I'll direct my question and comment to Chair Harrington. My name is Justice Raji. I'm Director of Reimagine Oregon, also 17-year Washington County resident. And my question is simple. What steps, thank you, Chair Harrington, for your commitment to the work of Reimagine Oregon over the last year, and hope to be engaged more. But what steps can we take to ensure the voice of the Black community is present in the process, as the community comes together to talk about these funds and how they can be invested, in our recovery?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Justice, for asking it. So Reimagine Oregon Commissioner Treese and I have been fortunate to have been invited to be on the journey to help learn from our Black leaders throughout the Portland and the state to reimagine public safety, as well as reimagine Oregon here so that we can remove historic barriers and inequities over the course of time, make up for lost time, really. For those of our community who may not know, the state of Oregon has some anti-racist practices from decades or centuries past, and things have built up on our community over time. So we are blessed, Justice, to have hired our first ever Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, Latricia Tillman. And across the board, not only with the ARPA dollars, but all across all divisions and programs here at Washington County, she is helping to ensure that we do at least two things. One is that we are including all members, especially historically disadvantaged community members and groups, to participate in our policy and investment decision making. Second aspect is she is making sure that we are using equity in our policy and investment decision making across the board. So not only are we reaching out, but we're looking inward as well. And there are many other things that we're doing to advance our practices as an employer serving our community. More to your point of how are we ensuring through our ARPA program that we are better engaging? Well, part of it is why we're here today, to make sure that we're hearing more from the community. But as you also saw in the presentation earlier under community engagements, we know that we need to continue to evolve our practices. So that's why we're investing in community engagement. As mentioned, building community capacity through collaboration, as well as advancing data equity and making sure that we can hold ourselves accountable for knowing that we are doing a good job. So our staff is putting excuse me, putting those dollars into action so that we can be better enlightened about the needs and programs that we could invest in, particularly for the second tranche, where we have a little bit more time. So very good question, and know that we continue through the Board of Commissioners to be good partners. We have had presentations on Reimagine Oregon, and we will continue to be engaged. This Board of Commissioners has also approved funding in a sub-aspect of work from Reimagine Oregon, and that's reimagining public safety here in Washington County. So I know I covered a lot of territory, but I'd also like to turn it over to my fellow colleagues to address Justice's information. Any other commissioners?
I would concur, Chair. I just want to say thank you to Justice for putting his contact information in the chat, so we have that information. And I do want to underscore what the chair said, and also add that we are growing, we are changing, and it's been a process for us. We are so grateful to have our leadership, our staff leadership, be focused on these particular issues and have experience and a reputation that allows us to be comfortable with them guiding us, as well as our outside community guiding us. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Treese and Chair Harrington. Were there any other board comments on Justice's question and comment?
If I could step back for a minute and give a couple of other examples of what we have been doing as a result of our passing that equity resolution in February of 2020. And also through not only the coronavirus relief funds of the CARES Act, but also through our additional program dollars here in our area, the Metro Affordable Housing Bond programs and the Support Services Program. So through the CRF framework, we invested more dollars in working with the Urban League of Portland and ERCO, just as two examples of strengthening our community-based organization ties and meeting the needs of our Black community members. We also have ensured that we have used equity in our decision making for our affordable housing bond program investments and with the supportive housing services. So, for example, we worked with the Urban League of Portland to, which is Portland region, to make sure that as we let out contracts for supportive housing services support, that we were making sure to address the needs of our African American, Black community members of various cultures to do a better job than we have in the past. So I am very appreciative of the work of many different organizations to help us do a better job in working in partnership with them and increasing the workforce to do the work for our community members. So I wanted to make sure I gave a couple of key examples for our community members joining us today, so they weren't just hearing thematics.
Thank you, Chair. That does add some depth, I believe. I appreciate that, and I appreciate Justice bringing this topic to the floor. I know racial equity is a priority for this board and has been lifted up in the American Rescue Plan spending plan, process as a key criterion. I also heard, Chair Harrington, you mentioned Latricia Tillman's name, another great leader in our staff. I'll just proffer that as a mere fellow staff person. I've appreciated Latricia greatly since she's been brought on board as our Chief Equity Officer. And I think we can put her email without her objection, hopefully, into the chat, as well as Dorian's, in case there's follow-up here. And thank you, Justice. We noted you've left contact information as well, so we appreciate that. Let's see. Unless there's more comment on this particular topic, I am looking at Michael as our next questioner, and I'm noting too that we're coming closer to our end. Unfortunately, we had thought of wrapping up at around 11:25. So, Michael, are you ready to address our board for 2 minutes?
Yes, Philip. It's a very simple thing. I noted in the slides you have something directed towards homelessness. My question revolves about something that was that has been in and out of the news in the recent months, and that is the eviction notices and such. And what, if any, of the funds that we receive can we focus towards helping people from getting evicted from their homes, and also helping the other side of the picture, the landlords who are bearing the cost of rents not being paid and therefore hurting them? Are we doing anything? And if so, or if not, can we refocus a little bit towards that? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I'm looking to the board to see if there are any other board members that maybe haven't spoken already that wanted to address this one. I know that houselessness has been a key focus for this board for years, but the pandemic has only made the situation worse. And we've done a lot as an organization to address that. Any board member interested in a response here to Michael's comments and question?
Why don't I kick this off?
Thank you, Chair.
So we've been today really focused on how we've programmed the dollars made available through the distribution to Washington County from ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. There are other parts to that act, as well as other congressionally directed funding to various departments of the federal government. So I want to speak for a moment about funds that are directed through HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department. Both the state and our Washington County Housing Services, Community Development, departments have received funds directly from HUD for the purposes of helping our community members who may be at risk of eviction or in need of housing assistance. So in addition to the funding from the Metro Affordable Housing Bond and the Metro Supportive Housing Services measure that I mentioned earlier, this is another program that today's presentation has not yet spoken about. So people who are needing assistance, rental assistance, there has been a system that the state has had for folks to request funding assistance. Washington County has also worked with community-based organizations to help ensure that as they work with members of the community, that they're able to help enroll people into assistance programs. Both of those funding, or both of those avenues, work with another partner of ours, Community Action of Washington County, which Commissioner Tree serves on the board of directors for. So I'm sure she'll have more to say after me. As you might imagine, Michael and other community members, there is an overwhelming need for assistance. The federal government has provided certain deadlines for this program, and particularly since the eviction moratorium has been lifted by the federal government, the need is that much more acute. If I could put it this way, the point of desperation is now. Some folks are choosing to self-evict, i.e. to move before receiving any notices, but others are waiting to see if the assistance may come through. Washington County Community Action of Washington County, as well as the state, have put additional staff resources into trying to process the backlog of applications. Just last week, the federal government changed the rules in a good way, but prior to last week, because of the rules that the US Treasury put in that we have to follow in order to get these funds distributed, it was pretty arduous. It took about 4 hours per application to make sure that all the required information was collected and entered into yet another laborious database. So it's a system that is taxed to meet the overwhelming need, but we're trying incredibly hard. If there are folks that you know that do need assistance that have not yet connected, please do call 211 or reference the rental assistance programs that are available, including through the Washington County website, co.washington.or.us, or Community Action of Washington County. So just by way of background, I wanted to tee that up, and I'd like to turn it to assure all of our community members that even though we've not talked about that funding stream today, there is a lot of work going on to get those dollars to community members' hands and to landlords to cover these costs. So I'd like to turn it over particularly to Commissioner Treese, as she has been serving for the last 2.5 years on the Community Action Board of Directors, as well as to my other 3 colleagues as well.
I'll just make the quick, thank you, Chair. I'll just make the quick comment that at our last Community Action Board meeting, we did get a report from them about the process and how the money is coming out. It's a difficult system. The software system is not functioning at the highest level possible. So it's the time delay is unfortunate, but I know that they're working hard to manage that money and to get it out the door as quickly as possible. With that, I know that both Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Rogers haven't had a chance to chime in, and I thought I would look to them as well. And I know, Chair, you support that too.
Thank you, Commissioner Treese. Certainly, I'll join in on that. My conversations and participation has been more focused on some of our homeless camps, specifically the one in Forest Grove and the Forest Grove Foundation and other organizations that are very helpful and supportive of the people that are living in that camp. And so that's going to continue to be a part of my focus and certainly my education on the homeless situation. And it is something that is, there's no silver bullet to this. There's no one solution. We've got a lot of work to do to provide as much services as we possibly can and to help them get out of the homeless situation that they are enduring and see if we can re-engage them back into a home and certainly an environment, a work environment that will help them get out of homelessness. So I think that's been my focus so far. And I really appreciate certainly all the folks out in Forest Grove that have been working with me and certainly meeting with and keeping me apprised of the situation. So thank you for that.
Commissioner Rogers, did you want to address it as well?
Well, thank you. I think our role really was to listen today and hear the thoughts of various participants, which I appreciate. There's so many broad issues that we've heard certain perspectives, but there's other perspectives as well. One thoughtful comment that I heard a bit ago was, what do we do about these small landlords who are suffering in this particular economy from deferral of rent payments? These folks are not large numbers of units, but they're numbers of them. And so I appreciate that we need some balance. Others have worked on these issues a little bit more than I on this particular topic we're having today, but I have a very different view in terms of what might be helpful in the future. And that is not to put Band-Aids on these issues, but to try to find some meaningful way for people to advance their careers, advance their lifestyles. So I'm a big proponent of work systems, work positions where people can not perpetually rely on government aid, but that's a short-term gap filler to some sort of a system where we put money, real meaningful money, into getting people reemployed in positions that they're suited for. I know everybody said, well, not everybody's suited for certain kinds of things. We have people with various disabilities. I've never found that disability should be an issue for anybody. We should find things that they can do. Should find opportunities for them. We should find schools that we can have them attend. And so I would really like to see money in the future, because we can't sustain this at the federal level. We all know that. We all know that the Federal Reserve is looking at what they're going to do with interest rates. We all know the stock market is getting really concerned about what's occurring. So as small employers across the country are facing labor shortages, shuttering their businesses. And remember, small businesses employ most of the people in this country, not large ones. We need to have a meaningful look at what are we going to do to get the right workers in the right places. And for those folks who are what I call underemployed, I think others do as well, how do we give them job training so that they can get to the skill sets and the positions that they really want to have? And so I appreciate people participating. I listened more than anything else today, and I think it was good that everyone chimed in. But this is a much bigger, with many facets, many different players, a lot of people who have different perspectives who weren't on this particular call of somewhat 36 people out of 300 or 630,000. So but I appreciate you coming. I appreciate our staff putting these together because I think it's important for us to listen. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's very helpful. And as we said from the beginning, we are welcoming all the respectfully, provided perspectives of such a populous county as we do these town halls. And my hat is off to the board for holding these, the third of 4. This is, if you agree, this is sort of the beginning of the journey with respect to the American Rescue Plan and what Washington County is doing with those funds. So we are, I think, showing to the community, and I think this board is committed to the community to be transparent throughout the journey. That's what I'm hearing from all 5 of you. And so this is part of that. You have to start the journey with the first step. And I'll note that we had great participation from our community. We did not have people join us in our Spanish language channel today because this is the beginning of the journey. I personally do not see that as something to measure as a lack of interest. Moreover, it's something that our board is committed to providing, that being full and transparent access to all of you as decision makers around these federal dollars, among other things that you do as a board of county commissioners. So we as a board, me as somebody, one of many staff following your lead, are committed to continuing to provide those points of access, regardless of language, regardless of ability. So thank you to all of our interpreters today for all the work that you've done. And thank you, board, for your commitment. We are a little over time, but I cannot exit without asking each of you for final comments. And what I would like to do, should you agree to make a few comments of things that you have heard today, things that you didn't hear today that you wanted to point out briefly. I would like you to make those comments if you would, please. And I'm going to start with each of the district commissioners and end with Chair Harrington, starting in numerical order. So if we could have Commissioner Fye go first, and we'll just go down the line, and each of you take a few minutes to give some parting comments, if you would, please. And we will then wrap up our third town hall of the fiscal year. So if that sounds good, Commissioner Fye, would you like to go first?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, everyone who was able to tune in today and everyone who might be watching after. We really appreciate hearing from you, and we really appreciate the engagement that you provided to us and the feedback and the questions that you brought forward. I think this is how we make progress and hold each other accountable, is through these dialogues and ask these tough questions and ask us what we're doing. This is what's coming up. I think of people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So we really need people who are experiencing these hardships to come to the board and tell us so that we can help. And I'm really excited about the concerns that came around 211, and I'm really excited that Marnie was able to join in and share that the work that the Washington County does with 211, and then future improvements and future collaborations. I want to extend my thanks to you, Philip. You did a great job moderating this, and I really appreciate all the work that you put in. There's a lot of work that goes into planning a town hall. You're a fantastic communicator, and I really appreciate it. Dorian, you did a great job. Thank you for your presentation. I'm always impressed with you, every presentation that you do, so thank you. And I'm excited that we're going to make the information that you shared available to our community so that people can say, well, I have this suggestions. Could we make it into this bucket? And I think, nothing is impossible. And when Chair Harrington was speaking, I forget what it was, but there was a quote that came to us. And one of that quote was Colin Powell's, I think, said it a while back. And full transparency, this is a quote I heard yesterday from our county college. We were talking about leadership and what it takes to be a great leader as a county commissioner. And it really starts by listening to the community. So I really appreciate what Commissioner Roy Rogers said, listening to the people and really providing that sympathetic ear. That quote is, perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. And I feel like we have, I feel like we bring that. We're perpetual optimistic people at the board. So keep engaging us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Treese.
Thank you, Philip. And I certainly agree with everything that Commissioner Fye just said, and special thanks to our staff, to you, Philip, to Dorian. I think that we really got the information out. A couple quick messages. One is that it has been a value to this board to be transparent, to allow our community the opportunity to understand what it is that we're doing, what we're faced with, and to provide the input that we need to make good decisions. This is one of the many steps that we've been taking to ensure that transparency. So I really want to emphasize that. The one piece that I'm going to be taking away as an action item is the information that Colleen brought forward around legal representation for tenants who are facing eviction. I've already texted, can we understand more working to do that? So thank you to everybody, and I stay as dry as possible, and I hope you have a good weekend.
Thank you, Commissioner Treese. Commissioner Rogers.
It's always great to see the participation by the public. It's always heartwarming to see how our staff prepares and does their work. So I would echo both of my predecessors' comments. There's some old sayings about give a person a fish and they're able to feed themselves for a day. Teach them how to fish and they can feed themselves for a lifetime. And so I'm hoping that what's going to happen is that we don't just move problems down the road, but somehow we figure out, and I think this board's talented enough to do it, how to deal with job training aspects, which I talked about earlier, and looking at solutions that are not just simply, I'm going to feed folks today, I'm going to house them today, with no hope that that's going to occur in the future. And my last little parting is that if you follow financial, being a CPA, we have certain occupational issues. We look at certain things differently maybe than others, but we're looking at some very frightening inflationary amounts coming at us. If we are not preparing people to deal with that with skill sets and with programs, we've only really solved issues for a very short period of time. So I would hope in maybe our last session of the year, which is coming up in about 3 months, that we have some very thoughtful comments from the public. Now, these aren't all thoughtful, they are, but on other issues that help us to understand how we might target dollars to accomplish long-term solutions. And I understand, I've been in that position myself when I was a young person, that you got to feed yourself and you got to take care of things. So I understand that that's hard and it's immediate, but there also has to be hope. There has to be a promise for tomorrow. And if we don't have that hope and we don't have those aspirations for a better tomorrow, we don't really have any country that's going to be great. We have to have great people, because that's what we are, great people, united. And so I'm hoping that's going to be the standard for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. Commissioner Willie.
Yes, thank you, Philip, and thank you, other commissioners. The one thing that that I always take away from these meetings is learning a little bit more of an appreciation of what some of the priorities that our constituents that we really don't hear from much, and certainly 211 was one of those today. Tenant right to counsel is another one that I heard today. So these are all things that we get to kind of go back and do a little bit more research on, and certainly have more conversation on. And I want to echo my commissioners' thanks to Dorian, who was the participator or make the presentation today, but behind her was hundreds and hundreds of hours of staff time by a number of other people, really focusing on where we should prioritize this money and how we could best do that. And so I can't say enough thanks and to all of their hard work and certainly their perspective. It's interesting. One of the areas that was discussed in where we're going to allocate some money, but really we wasn't a part of this conversation necessarily, is certainly the broadband issue. And I just want to communicate, we have some money allocated for broadband, and we actually have two aspects of broadband study and enhancement, quite frankly, going on right now. One is in our rural areas that we're doing through the Columbia Pacific, which is basically a 4-county economic development group. We're doing that for both rural Washington County and the other counties. And so look forward to getting our consultant report there in about 5 or 6 more months. And then we also realize that within our very own county, we have some broadband issues as well. And so we are dedicating some money towards a study that will identify where and how we can best address those issues. So broadband is just a little part of this $58 million, but certainly a very important aspect to provide folks who just don't have broadband access, or certainly not fast enough speeds, so that they can keep up either with work or with their schooling. So that'll be our focus. So thank you again for being here today. And I turn it over to the chair.
Thank you, commissioners, for sharing your highlights from today with everyone. One of the things that really struck me today is how fortunate we were to have so many community partners in attendance and to ask us questions about what's next. We don't have any firm timeline set up for when we're going to go about soliciting ideas for the second tranche funding. It's one reason why we have dollars going into community engagement as part of this first step, to help us do a better job and ensure that we are making thoughtful decisions as informed by others, other nonprofits, other community-based organizations, as well as other economic players. I'm really proud of this framework that we've put together and that the board has adopted for this first set of funds from ARPA. And I think you can be really proud of that as well, being the community that we serve. So thank you again for joining us today. As referred to previously by one of my colleagues, our next town hall for the year of 2021 is coming up in December. That will be a Thursday night. Yes, Thursday night, December 2nd. We usually hold it at about 6 p.m. We have tried different days of the week through this set of 4 town halls here in 2021. We know that when you start your day, government isn't the first thing that you think of. We know we're a safety net government to ensure that everyone has access to opportunities for a better life, and that we have good underlying systems in place so that you can live your life seamlessly. Everything from roads, communication access, garbage delivery, public safety services, and other things. So thank you again for joining us today. Thank you to our staff for what you do each and every day in public service to our communities, and certainly in support of hosting this town hall today. I'll turn it back over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Board of County Commissioners, all 5 of you participating today. This has been, I think, a very successful town hall, the 3rd of 4, and thank you, Chair Harrington, for pointing out the 4th one coming up on December 2nd, Thursday. You're absolutely right. In the meantime, I know that there are various topics coming to your board all the time, and the board can go to, or the public can go to our webpage to find access. I think housing is coming up on Tuesday. Emergency support for the houseless is a topic that came up in our town hall today, and I know the chair mentioned that in the chat. These are links on your screen for more information about our use of the American Rescue Plan dollars. We've got an English page and a Spanish page. The entire town hall today has been captured on our YouTube channel. So you will find the slide deck, the YouTube link, and other information on these 2 web pages in the future. And we will make sure the public hears about all of this information on our social media feeds as well. This is a journey of 1,000 steps. As I mentioned, these were some of the first steps. So I appreciate, once again, our board's commitment to transparency and making this information accessible to our community. We are going to close our town hall today a little bit longer than we had anticipated, but again, the commitment to the public and getting responses to comments and questions was very much there. And if your part of Washington County is like where I am, there's a little ray of sunshine that has just emerged today. So with that, there is hope, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.